I remember that day like it was yesterday, the day I felt the most humiliated I've ever been in my life. Charlotte Beaumont, the daughter of my former boss and now in charge, a viper who only cared about money, told me I was no longer needed at the company. Me, who had poured my blood into that company, was now being discarded like trash. My name is Jessica Robinson. I'm 28 years old. And this is the story of how I built an empire, only to see it threatened by someone who never understood the value of building something from scratch. When I joined Beaumont Logistics 5 years ago, the company was just a building full of ambition. Mirrored glass trying to look modern, a reception too cold, and empty offices that echoed with promises. There was no glamour, no structure, but there was something that caught my eye. Potential. Raw, rebellious, imperfect potential, just like me. Back then, I was also under construction. I had just finished an intense master's program, my mind buzzing with ideas and algorithms. I lived in an apartment with no curtains and a fridge emptier than my bank account. But the first time I walked through those doors, something told me this place would be more than a job. It would be home. I was hired for a technical, low-profile role, a systems engineer to support the company's digital transition, as the memo put it. But I knew I could do more. Much more. I spent the first few days analyzing logistics flows with the eyes of someone who doesn't accept the obvious. And what I found was chaos disguised as routine. Poorly planned routes, duplicate deliveries, idle trucks, warehouses overflowing in some areas and completely empty in others. It was a tone-deaf orchestra, and each mistake cost a fortune. I tried to share my findings, but people listened with the same patience you give an overexcited child. Until one day, after much insistence, I secured a 15-minute meeting with Mr. Terry Beaumont himself. I remember it clearly. A Friday, late afternoon, him sitting in his leather chair that creaked with every move. He watched me silently as I opened my charts, diagrams, and prototypes. I explained the concept of the adaptive algorithm I was developing, a system capable of adjusting routes, loads, and schedules in real time using live data. He scratched his chin, looked at his watch, then at me. "You really believe this can work?" "I don't just believe. I'd stake my career on it." He let out a low, almost ironic laugh. "I like people with guts. Run your test, Miss Robinson, but if you waste my time, you'll know it." That was the beginning of everything. I went home that night with my heart pounding. I knew this was my chance. I worked for weeks on end, sleepless nights, living on coffee and protein bars, tweaking every line of code, testing simulations, starting over from scratch when needed. The system was my baby, and I was ready to defend it with everything I had. When it launched, something magical happened. In 2 weeks, the first results started coming in. In 1 month, operational costs dropped 30%. In 3 months, profits had quadrupled. The number was so absurd that some board members requested an audit. They thought it was a system error. It wasn't. It was the system. It was my work. Mr. Terry called me in for a one-on-one. No small talk. Just congratulations. "You're one of us now, Jessica. One of the gears that keeps this machine running." I walked out of that office with tears in my eyes. For the first time, I felt seen, like I was part of something bigger. Time passed, and my role in the company grew. I was promoted, got my own team, and my voice began to carry weight in strategic meetings. Investors asked for me by name. My reports were circulating among shareholders. I was the voice behind the numbers that put Beaumont in the spotlight. And then, she arrived. Charlotte Beaumont, the heiress, Mr. Terry's daughter. A pretty face sculpted for corporate campaigns. MBA in Switzerland, or was it London? I don't know. The kind of person who talks a lot and says very little. Her heels clicked like an impatient clock. And her gaze? A mix of superiority and disdain. She was hired as operations manager, and within a week she was already issuing commands like everyone there was her personal staff, including me. From day one, she saw me as a threat disguised as a colleague. No compliments, no questions, just orders. Everything I did, she tried to revise. When I presented a project, she tried to reframe it. When I led a meeting, she would interrupt to add a more strategic layer, as she liked to put it. The worst part, she was smart, not brilliant, but cunning enough to manipulate perceptions. She knew how to navigate, how to use her position to undermine others. She began excluding me from key decisions, always with a subtle excuse. "Oh, I thought you were busy with the new module. Didn't think it was necessary to call you." The atmosphere between us became a silent battlefield. Then came the moment I'll never forget. A meeting with the board and a few shareholder reps. I was presenting the results of our new demand forecasting algorithm. Graphs climbing, solid numbers, quiet compliments among the attendees. And then Charlotte stood up and interrupted me mid-sentence. "Can you explain this system to actual humans? Or do you only speak robot?" Silence. For a moment, time stopped. I felt the air vanish from my lungs. People looked around surprised. And then, laughter. Some nervous, others genuine. I froze. What hurt most wasn't the joke. It was the laughter. It was seeing people I admired, teammates, laughing at me like I was a parody of myself. I was bleeding inside. But outside, I smiled. Because I knew. I knew that without me, nothing in that company worked. I knew that every graph they applauded, every result that put the company on top was built on lines of code written by these hands. But something in me shifted that day. Charlotte wasn't just hostile, she was dangerous. And I started noticing signs, small moves, the way she cozied up to the board, meetings that started happening without my knowledge, the tone of emails growing more formal, more distant, as if they were preparing the ground for something big, something I couldn't see, but I could feel. And that's when I understood. She didn't just want to erase me. She wanted to eliminate me. It was a sweltering Monday in Fort Lauderdale, the kind of day where the sun seemed to boil the asphalt before 8 in the morning. The kind of heat that clings to your skin and makes you restless, like the very air knows something is about to go terribly wrong. I woke up with the feeling that this wouldn't be an ordinary day. And my intuition rarely fails me. When I arrived at the company, I sensed something was off. People avoided my gaze in the hallways, and the greetings were dry, mechanical, almost as if they were witnessing a scene they'd rather not be part of. I opened my email. There it was, with that short, cold, and direct subject line. Board meeting, room 1, urgent, presided by Charlotte Beaumont. My stomach turned. It wasn't normal to receive invites like that. No context, no agenda. And Charlotte? Charlotte never summoned me directly. She made a point of ignoring me whenever she could. Still, I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked toward room 1. Steady shoes, chin held high. On the outside, I was composed. On the inside, a storm was raging. When I walked in, everyone was already there. The board members, the directors, the familiar faces I had helped build the company with from the ground up. But something was different. They weren't smiling. No nods, not even a raised eyebrow. Charlotte sat at the end of the table, her posture impeccable, arms crossed over a black leather folder. Her eyes met mine like I was just another item on the agenda. But I saw it. I saw that glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. That expression people wear when they've already tasted victory before the battle even begins. She cleared her throat, and the silence that followed felt like a muffled gunshot. An invisible cut. "Jessica," she began bluntly, her voice overly polished to sound sincere. "We're entering a new phase at the company, seeking fresh air, new structures, and after internal discussions with the other board members, we've concluded that it's time to go in a different direction. Unfortunately, you're no longer part of the company's future plans." Silence. The world could have collapsed at that moment and no one would have noticed. I stood there frozen for a split second as those words, so carefully rehearsed, so clean and raw, tore through everything I had built there. Years of dedication, sleepless nights, decisions that saved entire departments, erased in a single sentence. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I swallowed the lump in my throat, lifted my chin and forced a smile. The kind that hides far more than it reveals. "Interesting," I said, voice steady. "I've spent the last 5 years turning this company from a pile of promises into something respectable. Every algorithm, every optimization, every penny saved has my name hidden underneath. I stepped forward. The eyes that once avoided me now stared with something between guilt and discomfort. But that's fine, I continued, sarcasm dripping like honey. It's been a pleasure helping build what you now call success. Truly. I wish you luck. You'll need it. Charlotte tried to keep her composure, but I saw the slight wrinkle in her forehead. She didn't expect me to walk out like that, whole, proud. She wanted my collapse, my desperation. She wanted to see me small. But that wasn't what she'd get. I grabbed my bag, gathered my notebooks, my favorite pen, and that small photo of my mother I kept on my desk. Each item a reminder that everything I had there, I had earned. Nothing was handed to me, not even respect. And even so, I had won. As I walked out, I heard whispers behind me, people asking, but why? Others murmuring my name with pity. Crossing the reception hall, I realized how much that place had become mine more than anyone else's. Every corner, every screen blinking with a system I helped build. The gears still turned with my signature. At the exit, the glass door reflected my face. Tired, yes. Wounded too. But defeated? Never. And that's when a thought hit me like a silent lightning bolt. Charlotte, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. She thought she was discarding me. But I knew. I knew something she was completely unaware of. She might have the title, the last name, and the glass office with the ocean view. But I had something infinitely more valuable: strategic intelligence. And the knowledge that without me, the company's most important contracts couldn't move forward. Charlotte didn't know that, but the board did. So did the investors. My signature was on documents she didn't even know existed. Ironclad agreements drafted alongside Mr. Terry himself, her father. She may have won the move. But the game? Oh, that was still being played. And checkmate would be mine. 3 days after my departure, Fort Lauderdale seemed swallowed by an even more unbearable heat. Or maybe it was just the tension lingering over the glass-paneled hallways of the company I helped build. From my apartment, with the ceiling fan humming lazily above, I watched it all unfold like a privileged spectator. I knew something was about to happen. And it did. It was around 10:30 in the morning when the Nexus project, renamed by Charlotte to make it sound original, was officially presented to the investors. A project I conceived, designed from scratch with data architecture and network structure built by me, and there she was, trying to sell it as just another idea in a portfolio. The company auditorium, where I had so often presented reports with eyes lit up by passion, now carried a funereal air. Charlotte wore her best blazer, her hair tied back with a rigidity that felt almost symbolic. Behind her, colorful graphs danced on the screen, words like scalability, energy efficiency, and technological disruption flowed from her lips with the ease of someone who memorized them, not someone who understood them. The partners watched in silence. Among them, Howard Malkin, a senior East Coast investor known for his zero tolerance for amateurs, sat with his arms crossed and his brow furrowed. Charlotte closed the presentation with a rehearsed smile. We are confident that Nexus will be the company's next strategic leap. Then Howard raised his hand, slowly. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of a sentence. One question, Charlotte. Who will be responsible for the technical execution? Charlotte hesitated for a second. And in that second, everything unraveled. Our engineering team is ready to take over. We have capable professionals. Everything has been properly handed over. Howard laced his fingers on the table. His gaze was sharp as a blade. And Jessica Robinson? Her name echoed like thunder through the room. Charlotte's brow tightened. As I said, she's no longer with us. We're restructuring. Then another partner, voice dry and precise, spoke from the back of the room. Then we have a problem. Charlotte turned, surprised. What do you mean? The contract, Charlotte. The agreement with Blue Haven Capital requires the technical presence of the project's lead engineer. That is Jessica. It's signed, registered, and validated. Without her, there's no approval. Her expression deflated. It was as if all the blood had drained from her face. For a moment, silence overtook the room, and the sound of the air conditioner was suddenly too loud. But we can renegotiate. I can handle it personally. Howard cut her off impassively. We don't bet on improvisation, Charlotte. We bet on talent. And you're the one who took talent out of the equation. She tried to respond, but nothing came out. Her pride was sinking slowly, like a punctured ship. They say pride is the last thing to die. But that day, it started to bleed inside her. Charlotte left the meeting with heavy steps and fire in her eyes. She climbed to the 14th floor, where her father Terry Beaumont's private office was located. The door was slightly ajar, and he was reading something on his tablet when she entered without knocking, her blazer now disheveled. "You put clauses in the contracts," she snapped, throwing a folder onto the desk. Terry looked up, calm, as if he had been expecting this confrontation. "Yes, I did." "You hid that from me? You undermined my authority as president." Terry placed the tablet down and stood up slowly. His eyes, aged and steady, locked onto his daughter's with the force of decades of leadership. "I protected the company, Charlotte. You acted on impulse. You fired the mind behind the systems that support 60% of our revenue. What did you expect? That a junior team could handle a project she spent years building?" Charlotte turned away, frustrated. "She's arrogant, insolent. She's brilliant." Terry slammed his hand on the table, making the tablet shake. "And you underestimated her." For a moment, Charlotte looked small. For the first time, without the shield of her last name, without the spotlight of the presidency, she was just a woman cornered by her own decisions. "What do you suggest I do now?" she asked, her voice thick with anger and wounded pride. Terry didn't hesitate. "You're going to call her, set up a meeting, and pray she agrees to hear you out." Charlotte clenched her jaw. "She'll gloat over me. She'll have every right to. What you did to her was disloyal. But if you're lucky, Jessica might still have some loyalty left to the company she helped build. Now go, do the right thing, before everything collapses." Charlotte left the room without saying another word. But deep down, she knew her father was right. She had to swallow her pride and make the call. Right then, my phone buzzed. I saw Charlotte Beaumont on the screen, and I confess I smiled to myself. Not out of arrogance, but out of justice. I answered after 2 rings. Her voice on the other end was controlled but tense. "Jessica, we need to talk." "Thought you'd call sooner," I replied, letting the silence soak up the irony. She took a deep breath. "Are you available for a meeting with the partners? We'd like to discuss possibilities." I let the pause linger longer than necessary. Just enough for her to feel it. "Maybe I am," I said, with the calm of someone holding all the cards. "Depends on the conditions." "Can we talk in person?" she asked. "Of course." I looked out the window. The Fort Lauderdale sun burned on the asphalt the same way my patience burned for justice. "I love reunions." I hung up, then slowly turned around with a smile on my face. Charlotte had just opened a door she'd never be able to close on her own. And me? I was about to rewrite the rules of the game. The room was packed. The air felt thick with tension, as if every breath was being measured and weighed. Lawyers, executives, and that small army of impassive stares waited for the meeting to begin. Charlotte was there, clinging to what remained of her pride, her expression composed, though her hands betrayed her nerves, fingers interlaced in a desperate attempt to stay steady. I walked in, and the energy shifted. The sound of my heels echoed through the room like a declaration. The leather folder in my hand might have looked like an accessory, but in truth, it held my power, the key to my revenge. My posture, upright and unflinching, was enough to make Charlotte break into a cold sweat. I couldn't hide the satisfaction burning in my chest. With every step toward her, I moved further from a past I was finally beginning to take command of. I made my way to the head of the table, unhurried, unshaken. I set the folder down on the glass surface and looked around at every face in the room. They knew what was happening, and they knew I was the one in control now. Charlotte, trying to hold her composure, was the first to speak. Her tone sounded rehearsed, but the tension in her clenched jaw and fixed gaze betrayed how nervous she really was. "Jessica, we're offering your former position back to you, under the same conditions as before." I rolled my eyes. Seriously? I thought. I looked at her with an expression that didn't bother to hide my disbelief. The audacity to offer me the same position, as if nothing had happened, was almost pathetic. With an ironic smile playing on my lips, I took a deep breath before replying, "You think you can treat me like garbage and now offer me the same cold dish? No. If you want me back, it'll be for double the salary. And equity." The silence that followed was razor sharp. I knew I'd played the right card, the unbeatable card. Charlotte swallowed hard, her eyes wide as if I'd spoken a foreign language, something unthinkable. "That's blackmail," she muttered, barely hiding the contempt in her voice. I slowly shook my head, the look in my eyes making it clear the game had changed. "No, that's justice. This company wouldn't be worth a dime without what I built, and you know it." My voice was steady, unwavering. I meant every word. There was no room for doubt. I was the force behind everything, the mind that gave life to what she tried to pretend was hers. Terry knew it, and so did all the investors. The company she fought so hard to control, without ever truly understanding its core, was in my hands. Charlotte opened her mouth, maybe to protest, but didn't have the chance. One of the partners, looking uncomfortable, tried to soften the tension, but his words failed to mask what everyone already knew. "You're right, Jessica. Your contribution was essential." He looked at Charlotte with barely restrained sternness. "Perhaps it's time we reconsider the offer." Charlotte looked stunned, like she was being swept away by a current she couldn't fight. Her hands, once steady on the table, were now trembling. The arrogance she'd always worn like armor was just a mask now, and it was beginning to crack. She hated me. That much was obvious. Every fiber of her body radiated disdain. But in that moment, she had no choice. She knew I was right. There was no turning back. She needed me. And under the watchful eyes of the partners, the lawyers, and the weight of the contract she'd failed to negotiate properly, Charlotte gave in. "Fine," she said, in the lowest voice I'd ever heard from her. For a moment, I thought she might choke on the words. "We'll revise the proposal. We accept your terms." But when she looked at me, I saw it in her eyes. She knew the game would never be the same again. The glow of victory had faded. The table had turned, and now I held the cards. I returned. I came back to the company, but not the way she expected, not the way anyone expected. This time I was valued, stronger, more present. My salary had doubled, and I had a significant equity stake. My influence was no longer a shadow. I was the pillar now, and everyone around me knew it. It was funny, really. For so long, I'd been treated like a disposable piece, a mere accessory in the machine. And now, I was the machine. The days that followed marked a triumphant return. I was back in the projects, reviewing code, analyzing systems I had helped build from the ground up. And yet, something inside me still stirred. A nagging feeling that wouldn't let me rest. There was something more, something behind my dismissal, something Charlotte hadn't planned carefully enough. And that feeling wouldn't go away. Deep down, I knew she hadn't acted alone. It wasn't just a desperate move. There was a dirty scheme, a deeper layer, something she was trying to hide. I'd already started investigating, traces she and her allies thought they'd erased. Subtle movements that, over time, would become impossible to ignore. And as I began to connect the dots, I knew that what lay behind it could destroy the company. And maybe even take Charlotte down with it. I wouldn't let it go unnoticed. And I wouldn't stop until I uncovered everything. Because in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it does, nothing will stop what I plan to do. The day seemed ordinary, but I knew something was wrong. As usual, I was buried in the system logs, analyzing data and looking for possible optimizations. But something caught my eye. A small error, something out of place. I knew it wasn't just a technical glitch. I clicked out of curiosity, more instinct than necessity. That's when I saw it. The first clue, suspicious logins, one day after my dismissal. Someone had accessed the system using my credentials, attempting to alter the very code I had developed. It didn't look like a simple system error. It was deliberate. Someone wanted to erase my tracks. My breathing quickened as I dove deeper into the logs. With every click, more pieces emerged, like a puzzle I already knew I'd complete. This wasn't just code changes, it was something much more serious. The worst part? Forged contracts had been initiated under my name. Contracts no longer serving the company, but benefiting the person who signed them. A clear attempt to seize control, to replace me, and perhaps erase me entirely. I closed the computer screen and stayed there for a few seconds, processing everything I had uncovered. The smell of betrayal hung unmistakably in the air. Rage started to boil inside me, but so did the sense of imminent justice. Charlotte, my former colleague, my ex-boss, she had tried to erase me. Not just me, but everything I had built. She wanted all the credit for herself, and she was willing to destroy my work to get it. I went after the proof, collecting everything I could find: screenshots, access logs, exact dates, timestamps, IP addresses. There was no more doubt. I had the evidence in hand, the complete puzzle. Charlotte hadn't just tried to take me down, she had tried to steal my work and my legacy. The irony? She didn't know that because of the contracts I was still there. She didn't know that, even from a distance, I was still indispensable. It was time to act. I scheduled a meeting with the board. They knew the situation had been tense since my departure, but none of them had any idea what was really going on. I walked into the room, the same room where it all began. This time, things would be different. I was the protagonist now, and Charlotte was about to learn that her dirty game would not go unpunished. As I entered, I felt the anxious stares, the hushed whispers among the executives. They were waiting for whatever I had to say. With a calm motion, I placed the folder on the table and looked at each of them, one by one. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence grow, letting the weight of the moment settle before releasing what needed to be said. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady and clear. I brought something you all need to see. Charlotte's eyes flickered, and she shrank slightly in her chair, as if she knew what was coming but tried to hide the panic rising inside her. She couldn't deny it, but she would try, as always. Her face was tense, her fingers clutching the edge of the table betrayed her. I pulled out my tablet and began presenting the evidence. The images and logs appeared on the screen one after another: forged contracts, unauthorized access to my code. The attempt to alter the system and core data of the project I had created. The directors started exchanging glances, clearly taken aback. The room, once so tense with the power Charlotte tried to command, was now filled with disbelief and unease. The whispers grew louder, and that's when Charlotte, in a moment of desperation, tried to defend herself. But her tone sounded hollow, like a child caught in a lie, trying to blame someone else. She always wanted everything, always thought she was better than me. She's just jealous, Charlotte shouted, her voice shaking with anger. The mask of leadership she had tried to wear shattered in front of everyone. Her hatred was palpable. But as she spoke, the fury behind her words wasn't enough to hide the truth. She knew she was defeated. The facade had fallen. I looked directly at her, without fear, without hesitation. I wasn't here to play anymore. It was time to reveal it all. No, Charlotte, I replied with calculated coldness, every word under perfect control. I'm the one who made this company work, while you dragged its name through the mud. The silence in the room was almost tangible. The tension was thick, as if time had slowed down, each second heavier than the last. Charlotte was frozen, her eyes wide, her mouth trembling with suppressed rage. The board, all of them staring at her, waited for the verdict. Not a word was spoken. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. She had been exposed. The dirty game was clear. And there, in that moment, all the cards were on the table. There was no denying it anymore. Charlotte was no longer the president of the company. In fact, she was no longer anything. The CEO was the first to break the silence. With a steady gaze, he turned to Charlotte and, with unshakable calm, said, "Charlotte, your conduct is unacceptable. You're out. Not just from the presidency, but from the company. The board has made its decision." She stood up, a mix of fury and disbelief written all over her face. She tried to speak, but the words just wouldn't come. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and in the end, she just looked at the other board members, hoping for a miracle that would never come. No one spoke, out of respect for the decision, and Charlotte was escorted out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallways she once believed were hers. Now, she was just a former employee, and I was there, at the center of it all. Terry, old, sharp-witted Terry Beaumont, called me aside for a private talk. I saw his silhouette approaching as the rest of the board left the room. His steps were calm, but there was something more in them than just the demeanor of a boss. He had been watching me from the beginning, and in that moment he seemed to feel the need to share words that would carry great weight. He looked me in the eyes and gave a slight smile, as if he knew that all that waiting had finally come to an end. It was his moment to reveal himself to me. He, the silent mentor, was now acknowledging me. And somehow, I could feel he was passing the torch to the one who truly deserved it. "You were always my choice, Jessica," he said, his voice deep and measured. His words echoed in that brief moment of time, as if he were opening a door to a future he knew was bound to come. Now the world will know who really made this company thrive. My heart raced with the weight of those words. I had done it, not Charlotte, not the investors, not the contracts, me. I was the one who built this company, and now, most importantly, I was in control. It wasn't about vanity, it wasn't about pride, it was about recognition. It was justice. "You're in charge now," Terry continued, his voice filled with the confidence only time could give. "And I know you'll do whatever it takes to lead this company where it truly belongs." I was called to the presidency, and when I entered that room, the weight of what was happening hit me in full force. But at the same time, a wave of realization washed over me. I was about to take on a role that for so long had been just a distant dream. Not because I had always wanted it, but because it was what the company needed, and I was the right person for it. The new beginning didn't come with pomp or celebration. It was simply a job that needed to be done, something I already knew how to do. I transformed the company quickly. I led its expansion into new international markets, closed partnerships that were once unthinkable, and made bold decisions that strengthened our position in the global market. What was once a good company had now become a giant, something no one could ignore. My vision was finally materializing, and the pieces were falling into place. And yet, even as all of this was unfolding, I couldn't help but think of Charlotte. I remember the scene clearly, her being escorted out of the company, her heavy steps, her head down, the humiliation written all over her face. The irony was brutal. Charlotte, who once tried to push me out of the way, was now nothing but an ex-employee. And I, the one she saw as a threat, was now the breath of fresh air the company needed. It was a power game, and I had won. In the months that followed, I received several reports about Charlotte's whereabouts. Many said she was trying to find a new path, looking for opportunities at other companies. But nothing compared to the position she had lost. And no matter how hard she tried to reinvent herself, her shadow over this company wouldn't be so easily erased. I, on the other hand, never looked back. What mattered now was the future. What felt like an ending for her was, in truth, the beginning of my era. And I was ready to be the leader this company had always needed, without fear, without hesitation. The irony of it all? The company, which had always been a reflection of my effort and dedication, was finally recognizing my worth. I was no longer just an invisible piece of the puzzle, someone behind the curtain taking care of the details. I was at the center of it all. The world now knew who I was, and this was just the beginning. I remember the last time I saw Terry. He smiled at me and said, with the certainty of someone who had fulfilled his purpose, "I knew you'd make it, Jessica. I knew it." And in that moment, I knew he was right. The future was mine, and nothing and no one could stop me. Now tell me, if you were in my place, what would you do? If you had built something from scratch, a whole project, an idea born in your sleepless nights, while the world slept and you fought in silence. If every line of code had been written with the strength you had left after hearing, "You're just one more," "This is too complicated for you," "It's not going to work," would you let someone else erase your name? Would you accept being pushed out of your own creation as if you had never existed? Would you stay silent in the face of injustice? Or would you stand up and face it all to claim what is rightfully yours? I chose to fight. Because in the end, only I know how many times I swallowed my tears in that company's bathroom. Only I know how many sleepless nights I spent trying to find the perfect solution. And only I know what it cost me to get here. And that's why I say, don't let them erase your story. If it's yours, if you created it, if it was born from your mind, your hands, your courage, then fight. Fight until the end. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below, what's your name, how old are you, and where are you following this story from? Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, because there's a lot more stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them.